And welcome back to the Reclaimer Book Club, where we read the Halo books and discuss them and for your entertainment. And well, we also tell you whether or not you should read them. But since we are on a short time crunch, Courier, mind starting off with our summary of the book?
All right, so Halo First Strike takes place immediately after following the events of Halo CE, literally just minutes, hours afterwards. The scene opens up with Cortana and Chief and the longsword. The both of them escape from the Halo Ring in the first Halo game,
Yes, and from the
um,
same, also from the book Halo: The Flood as well.
and Halo the Flood. Yes, indeed. Both of them briefly discuss the events of the first and think about the events of the first Halo game and discuss a plan on how to get back to the UNSC and warn them about everything, the
Wait,
flood,
hold
the
on.
Halo rings.
Wasn't there like a prologue first that like depicted the Battle of Reach from the perspective
Yes.
of
Oh,
Red
you're
Team?
right. Sorry,
Yeah.
I usually think about that during Halo, the Fall of Reach or whatever, because it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't really fit in too well with First Strike. But so
Well,
that's
it does.
that's
It does kind of tell. It is important for how
yeah.
Red Team and reconnects with Chief. So that is it's
Indeed.
relevant to the story.
Yeah, that's the true opening. I say is following the
Yeah.
events of Halo CE. The cold opening of First Strike is basically during Halo: The Fall of Reach, right after Blue and Red Team split up. Blue Team with Kelly, James, I believe, and Master
And
Chief
James
go
and
to
Chief.
the orbital station in order to secure the Circumference's navigational database, and then Master Chief tasks Fred, Spartan 104, with leading the rest of the Spartans, some 20 plus Spartans, down to the surface of Reach in order to protect the fusion generators that are beaming power up to the super Mac guns in orbit above Reach, and which are basically holding the Covenant Armada off. Um, and they need to go down there and protect it from Covenant ground forces. So they start going down there in their Pelican. En route, they are shot down by a bunch of Seraphs and their Seraph fighters, and their Pelican begins tumbling into the atmosphere out of control. Fred makes the decision to have all of the Spartans basically free dive, like free fall skydive out of the Pelican and pressurize their Mjolnir armor while aiming for trees and water right before they hit the ground. Him doing that saves most of the Spartans, but horribly injures about half of them and ends up killing about, I believe it's 6 to 7 of them. I don't know
I
the
think it was
Only four.
4 or 5.
Only four.
4 or 5, yeah. Which Fred and Kelly both comment as the single biggest loss of Spartan life or whatever all at once
Yeah, the most Spartan casualties in a single mission, which
in or event. Yeah.
If only they knew what was to come.
Anyway, they're all injured to some degree, mostly, including Fred, who has some pretty fucking terrible injuries to his chest, including internal bleeding and other such stuff, and I think a ruptured hydrostatics disc in his armor, so it's not as effective as it used to be. But all of them move out and begin making their way to the orbital generator complex. They get there only to find about 5 Marines out of the 2,000 plus Marine contingent there that was guarding the facility to have actually survived. The rest of the area around the facility is just a barren hellscape devoid of life, just covered in destroyed wreckage of Covenant vehicles, UNSC vehicles, Marine, Grunt, Elite, Jackal bodies, just absolute carnage surrounding the generator complex for kilometers in all direction. They found out that the Marine contingent held off the Covenant for about 3 or 4 hours before eventually getting overwhelmed, and they requested an airstrike from High Command. High Command promptly freaked the fuck out, thought that the orbital generators were about to fall, and sent in a bunch of longsword bombers to saturate bomb the area around the entire complex, which ended up killing everybody except for, like I said, these 4 or 5 Marines.
Good job.
Um, yeah. So Fred has the injured people on Red Team and a handful of others stay and guard the generator complex. He sends 3 or 4 members of Red Team to go in escort and protect a Admiral Whitcomb, a admiral who basically is in charge of Reach's ground defense now. And then him, Kelly, and boy, who is it?
Which actually, the book at first. Oh, what were you saying, Forrest?
I was saying the third member was Joshua, who accompanied Fred and Kelly.
Joshua, thank you. And then Kelly, Joshua, and Fred. They note that there's a Covenant carrier or a Covenant ship hovering in the valley next to the generator complex, and they're like having a massive staging ground set up for another assault or another go at the generators. While he has everybody else do their jobs, he, Kelly, and Joshua commandeer 3 Banshees that they took.
I think they split up the Spartans into 3 teams, specifically 1 to guard the generators, 1 to get the Admiral, and
one
then
to get the Admiral, and then him, Kelly. That's what I've been saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Noble.
Sorry.
And then him, Kelly, and Joshua commandeer some Banshees, take one of the basically like football-sized Fury tactical nukes from the armory cache they have there at the generator complex.
I was gonna say, didn't they recreate that scene in one of the trailers for Halo Reach, the game?
Delivering Hope. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. Basically, they go over the ridge or whatever. They approach the Covenant camp. The Covenant don't fire on them initially or whatever because they're in the Banshees. The Covenant discover that the Banshees are being piloted by humans. Too little, too late. Joshua fucking opens his Banshee and chucks the football nuke into the Covenant gravity lift. Yeah, which sends it up the gravity lift into the carrier. But in the process of doing so, his Banshee is hit and is basically the speed is greatly slowed down. Kelly and Fred pull ahead of him and dive their Banshees over the hill on the other side of the valley. Nuke detonates, takes out the Covenant ship, and Joshua as well, along with the 20,000 strong plus Covenant ground force they have there.
Yeah, one more thing. I wanted to mention that the Admiral Whitcomb, like they make it seem like at first they're like the Spartans are kind of like a little bit irritated that he's like commanding ground operations, and like it doesn't seem like he knows what he's doing, but that becomes relevant later on. So I figured I'd mention that.
I know. I'm just giving an overall review of the book. I'm not going into nitty-gritty specifics. So anyway, Joshua gets killed doing that. Kelly and Fred briefly celebrate, thinking they've won, only to hear over the radio the other Spartans detonate nukes at the generator compound since their position got overrun, and the Covenant forces basically had them surrounded. They chose to basically blow themselves up and take the Covenant with them. And so the cold opening ends with Kelly and Fred putting out a distress call to any remaining UNSC forces to link up at a castle base, which is not the same base you see in Halo Reach. It's a different base.
It's a sword base.
I was just about to say
sword bases in Halo Reach. This is castle base. It's a different UNSC base, but they're going to go link up there and hopefully.
Wasn't Castle Base also featured in the Fall of Reach novel?
Yes, it's the base that has the titanium mine underneath it that John and the other Spartans go down to train in immediately following their augmentations.
Yeah, and then they beat up the guys in like the old like Mark 1 or Mark 3 power yeah,
Mjolnir power armor.
Which is more of like a kind of robotic suit than a suit of armor.
Yeah, but anyway. That's the end of the cold opening for the book. The proper opening starts where I said it started, following Halo CE. Master Chief and Cortana are presented their opportunity to return to UNSC space in the form of a Covenant Covenant cruiser and several ships that show up in system, basically searching for survivors, both UNSC and Covenant. And so Chief formulates a plan to capture the Covenant cruiser and take it back to Earth, not directly because of the Cole Protocol, but take it back there eventually regardless. In the route, or in the process of doing that, they recover several cryopods from the Pillar of Autumn. One of which, coincidentally and luckily enough, has Linda in it, who's still alive. Well, still dead but frozen.
Clinically dead is what the
Clinically
term.
dead but
Yeah.
frozen. Yeah. Or as Chief puts it, she's in some kind of twilight state in between life and death.
Yes, the
Um,
not very scientific term. But
Yeah, but it's apt enough. So they recover the cryopods. Chief links up with the only other UNSC survivors from the events from the first Halo game, which is a Pelican driven by Warrant Officer Pulaski. And she has on board Lieutenant Haverson, which is he's an officer with the Office of Naval Intelligence. Corporal Locklear, which was one of the ODSTs stationed on board the Pillar of Autumn, and interestingly and amazingly enough, to Chief's shock and initial horror, Sergeant motherfucking Avery Junior Grade Johnson,
yes.
who survived the events of the first Halo game. The legendary ending is just a joke. It isn't actually canon. Chief initially is shocked at seeing Johnson because he assumed what he saw was Johnson's death on Private Jenkins' mission recorder during the level 343 Guilty Spark, and he rightly pulls him into the craft and threatens to blow his head off until both Cortana and Johnson calm Chief down and convince him that this is obviously some sort of a shocking anomaly, but the Sergeant is obviously not a mindless alien monster, and that basically Chief is going to work with him for now, but he's going to have him quarantine the first chance he gets when they return to UNSC space.
Because unlike us with hindsight, they don't know how the Flood exactly works. So
yeah, no, none of them know how the Flood work at this point. They don't have Forerunner data or other extensive things on it. Anyway, all of them go and successfully hijack the Covenant ship. They learn that it is a ship that was basically carrying a minor prophet, which is why the Covenant on board didn't self-destruct the ship like they did all the other times they tried to capture Covenant ships. They take control of the ship.
The Guardian of the Luminous Key. I actually thought the Guardian of the Luminous Key was supposed to be the artificial intelligence on the ship, which like, because we never actually see was this supposed minor prophet in the actual book. So I always assumed that because I was thinking about this, I was like, what if this minor prophet or this Guardian of the Luminous Key was the AI, which basically during this whole intrusion, they're Cortana, when she's hacking into the ships, the Covenant ships interface, there's a Covenant AI construct that's basically fighting her, and which is weird because the Covenant don't use AI, and I think as far as I know, this is the only instance where the Covenant do use AI. And
now they use AI in several other points. We just don't see it. This is one of the only examples we actually see first person
Interesting.
Covenant AI. But anyway, I thought initially that the Guardian was the AI too. But even though the Covenant do use AI, they treat them basically as they don't even treat them the same as grunts or whatever. They're basically just disposable tools to be used. So I don't think the AI is the minor prophet. I think what we're led to believe is the minor prophet was probably hiding somewhere on board, and he probably just died off screen when Cortana vented the atmosphere for the rest of the ship, to purge it of all the Covenant survivors on board, which is kind of disappointing. We never get any follow up to him, but at the same time, I kind of understand because the book is already fucking long enough and already covers enough events without having to create a new entire subplot about who the fuck the Guardian of the Luminous Key is and all that bullshit. But anyway, they capture the ship, and Chief suggests to Lieutenant Halverson, following the Cole Protocol, that they take the Covenant ship to secure a disabled UNSC ship there, and then return to UNSC space, basically to get UNSC salvagers out to salvage the ship.
Yeah,
and make sure there aren't
basically,
any like tracking devices or things on board.
I forget which like section of the Cole Protocol, but basically, first of all, to explain what the Cole Protocol is to those who don't know, the Cole Protocol is basically how the UNSC prevents the Covenant from finding Earth and other important military locations.
Hmm.
It's just basically they purge all data, and then they have like a set of like random jumps through slip space to prevent the Covenant from following them. And
Hmm.
however, there's a subsection of the Cole Protocol that basically says no Covenant ship shall enter
Be
like
brought
Earth,
directly to UNSC space.
which
Nobody is
I just,
aware of until Cortana points out, because as she states, before this point, nobody had ever managed to capture a Covenant ship intact. So
yes, and like this is like it was like a kind of a technicality of like. But yes, anyway, back to the yes, they go to Reach because
so
Reach is already like Reach
yeah,
was
Reach.
protected under the Cole Protocol, but since Reach just got glassed,
Yeah,
like
as Chief
it's
points out, that Covenant already know the location of Reach, so it's not a breach of protocol.
yes.
And secretly, Chief also wants to go there to see if any of the Spartans he had to abandon on the planet, basically like died there. And
Yeah,
Halverson, in a conversation with Cortana, makes it clear to Cortana that Halverson absolutely knows that's what Chief wants to do or whatever, and he says he would have been against it, but Chief he feels bad for Chief. He's sympathetic towards him, and he also Chief basically gave him like a perfectly good argument, and so he allowed him to go ahead and do it. But
yeah.
anyway, they get there. While they get there, when they arrive in system, they discover through a UNSC emergency communication a distress call, a seemingly generic, meaningless distress call that nobody on board recognizes, and everybody thinks is probably some sort of automated message, except for Chief, who ends the chapter by saying there are Spartans still alive down on Reach, and I'm going down to get them. Flashback. The book takes a flashback at this point to
Yeah.
several decades later during a Spartan 2 training exercise in
I like
the.
the most.
Oh yeah, I love this scene. But the Spartan 2 training exercise in the woods before the augmentations, several decades beforehand, where they are going up against a company of Marines on Reach during a training exercise, a game of capture the flag. Chief Fahad and a couple of the other Spartans sneak into their base. They cripple the enemy base or whatever, blow up some stun grenades, take out a couple guards with tranq darts, and successfully steal their flag and escape. However, when they make it to the rendezvous point where they're supposed to bring the flag, a Pelican containing Marines from the company that they were going up against basically capture Chief and demand that he.
Chief Petty Officer Mendez.
Yeah, basically demand that Chief turn over the flag that he had captured from them. Chief, with the help of the other Spartans, all 75 of them at this point, ambush the Marines and take their Pelican, winning the training exercise. But the whole point of this flashback scene is not only to establish once again the teamwork between the Spartans and how it sets them apart from all other soldiers of the UNSC, but also the distress signal that Chief was hearing was actually a 6-note like coded message or whatever, basically Ollie Ollie Oxenfree.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that is a real thing in our world, but apparently in the Halo universe is so obscure, insignificant, and forgotten that the only people who really know about it anymore was Deja, the Spartan 2s, and Halsey. And so if it's playing on repeat or whatever on Reach, Chief comes to the conclusion that one of those people, either his Spartan 2s or Halsey, must still be alive down there. So he has a long ensuing argument or discussion with Halverson and the other members of the team. And Chief eventually convinces them to go down there and investigate this signal. They go down and do so. Unfortunately, after being or shortly after being discovered by the Covenant, when the AI sends out the Covenant AI on board sends out a message to the Covenant that they've taken over the ship, the humans that is. Cortana deletes the Covenant AI and takes control of the ship again, but it basically puts them on a clock where they have to get in there, find the distress signal, and get out before the Covenant can discover or like stop them. So they go down, they do that, they discover the signal is from Lee, Anton, and I believe it's Grace.
Yeah.
Three members of the 3-member Spartan team that Fred sent off to go protect Whitcomb. They discover that Whitcomb and the 3 Spartans are in fact alive and well, and have basically been staging guerrilla like hit and run raids on the Covenant for the last 2 weeks between the fall of Reach and the events on.
Speaking of
Halo
that, that's one of the other interesting things is like 2 things happen when they jump from slip space from Threshold to Reach. I was gonna say one thing. Cortana discovers that the Covenant slip space technology can make a jump from atmosphere, because like well, they already knew that the Covenant's slip space like technology was more advanced, but to the point that even the Covenant didn't like fully understand how advanced their technology was, because they reverse engineered it from Forerunner technology.
Yeah, as Cortana says, the Covenant, and I think several other characters do, the
Yes.
Covenant are imitative rather than innovative. They basically they're kind of like the Mechanicus or the Brotherhood of Steel. I'd say more like the Mechanicus from 40K though. They
Yeah.
basically they get the technology, they worship it as like, basically gifts of their god. They protect it, but they don't actually understand how it works or like the exact details of the technology. And so she discovers this basically hidden facet of it that the even the Covenant don't know. And so she's
Yes.
able, to make us jump into slipstream space inside the atmosphere of another planet. And when the AI warns the Covenant or whatever at Reach that the humans have taken control of the ship, he sends data regarding how Cortana did this to them, which later on leads to the reason that the Prophet of Regrets carrier is able to jump into slipstream space over New Mombasa during the events of Halo 2 and Halo 3 ODST.
Yes. The other thing about this though is the other thing I wanted to point out. Shit, what is that? Is trying to remember. Fuck. It was the AI slip space. Oh yes, the other thing was the anomaly that was caused due to like the calendar, like the time and date got messed up when they
basically Chief and the others have experienced the passage of like, God, what was it for them? Like
3
due to
weeks.
due to the way like wacky slip space time works and the fact it's not the same as our universe, they experienced I think it's like 3 weeks or maybe a month or whatever traveling through slipstream space, experiencing the events of the first Halo game and then making it to Reach. For the others on Reach, it's more like 2 weeks have passed. So basically, Chief and the others kind of almost like jumped forward in time by a couple weeks accidentally. But that isn't really important. It's more of a plot point, so the events of the book can be set up. But anyway, so yeah, they go down there. They find the Spartan team and the Admiral alive. The Admiral states or relays to John the message that they heard from the rest of Red Team sent to guard the generators and how they're probably dead. But he also informs them that they did hear a brief transmission from Kelly and Fred regarding the meetup location and the events that have been transpiring there. They hadn't been able to make it because the distance was too far and there were too many Covenant troops guarding the castle base, which is basically being like excavated now by a Covenant ship. Halsey, Fred, Kelly, and the other Spartans are hiding there, and that's the reason why the Covenant haven't glassed the base yet, is because they're basically trying to excavate it for Forerunner technology, which the humans aren't aware of.
Specifically, a very specific artifact in particular.
Yeah. So Master Chief, Whitcomb, and the others go in the dropship to rescue the remaining Spartans in there. They go down. They successfully manage to rescue the other Spartans. Like I said, this is a high-level overview. We'll go in specifics in a bit. They manage to rescue Halsey and the other Spartans, and they are pursued and not immediately killed by the Covenant because Halsey and the other Spartans, in the course of playing hide and seek with the Covenant in the base, discovered the magical Forerunner artifact that the Covenant were trying to look so hard for. It's basically a floating crystal that kind of like splits up and changes shape and composition depending on circumstances. And not even Halsey is fully aware of what it does, but she says basically the crystal reacts to and changes depending on gravity, and it basically changes like the properties of gravity and slipstream space around them. So they flee with the key on board. Covenant tried to stop them. They can't manage to, or they don't manage to before they make it back to the Covenant cruiser, where Cortana picks them up. The Covenant cruiser now kind of having been like ad hoc fused or joined together with another UNSC ship for more
the UNSC
power.
Gettysburg.
Yeah, a destroyer for frigate for more power for the Covenant ship, since it's kind of running low at this point. They jump into slipstream space, think they're all safe or whatever, that they got away, and this
then
is when
which they basically are, because Admiral Whitcomb had set up the nukes to detonate the fucking Covenant fleet.
Yeah, which, like I said, we'll
Yeah,
talk about in a bit.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
yeah, it's all good. But yeah, they make it into slipstream space, thinking they're safe. Turns out the crystal that Halsey had, not only does it react to gravity, like I said earlier, but it also reacts to slipstream space. It basically unfolds and starts manipulating the space around them to the point where the Covenant ships are both able to see like each other or whatever, but also follow the UNSC ship and begin firing at each other, which leads to a giant, weird techno rave slipstream space bullshit.
Basically, the
orgy.
Covenant keep rolling ones in a tabletop game.
Yeah, basically the fucking shit goes crazy. Slipstream space goes whack, completely out of control. Chief takes several of the other Spartans out onto the exterior of the Covenant ship to repair the engines, who were sabotaged by basically the last couple survivors on the ship they captured, kind of a sort of a last fuck you from them.
Yeah.
They managed to repair the ship, and they're able to escape the Covenant, but in the process, several of his Spartans and Pulaski, the pilot, are killed by a plasma torpedo that kind of grazes over them and injures Chief and several of the other Spartans too.
Yeah.
So that event happens. The humans or whatever are still bent on returning to human-controlled space, more specifically Earth. But at this point, their ship is so badly damaged they can't actually make it. So they go to the nearest planet they happen to pop out of, which is Eridanus 2. Which is also where Chief's original like Spartan mission right after their augmentations took place, where they had to infiltrate the asteroid base and capture Colonel Watts. Chief leads them to the asteroid base and strikes a deal with the rebels, where basically the humans promise to buy the rebels time and protect them to allow them time to evacuate while they fight them off, if the rebels help repair and outfit their ship. The deal goes ahead, and they do so. But before the refit can completely take place, Cortana makes it clear after like decrypting the Covenant navigation database or whatever and combing through messages that the Covenant found out from an artifact on Reach that they in fact do know where Earth is and are currently gathering a massive armada to go and invade Earth. Whitcomb sees this as basically priority number one and grudgingly is forced to abandon the rebels and leave them behind at the hands of the Covenant to go and try to get the warning to Earth as soon as humanly possible. And to make matters even worse, while this is occurring, Halsey drugs and kidnaps Linda and takes off in another ship to an unknown destination without informing any of them of her goals or her plans.
She informs Locklear.
Locklear, yeah, but he gets killed trying to blow up the crystal basically.
Yeah, because
shortly
he's
after
basically because the crystal is like what is causing all of this. And like he's like, yeah, no, this thing is stupid and I don't want to deal with it, and he tries to destroy it, but he kills himself accidentally.
He does end up destroying it, or destroying most of it, but ends up killing himself in the process. Yeah.
Yes.
But all of that happens. They jump away from the asteroid, start heading back to Earth. Um, Cortana decrypts a little more of the communiques and database, and kind of gives the Master Chief and the others the overall layout of like how the Covenant invasion is sort of going to go, like where their command structure is and all that type of stuff. And Chief realizes, with a Covenant fleet of 800 to 900 ships, and dozens more
I thought it was
jumping in every.
500.
No, it's more like 800 to 900, I think. She says
500 at the station when they destroyed it.
500, yeah, but I think the overall implication was that more, like dozens more, were jumping in each day. So around, in the end, it was going to be around 1,000, I think,
Okay.
ships probably. But anyway, Chief realizes that even if they did get back to Earth and deliver the warning ahead of time, with so many goddamn Covenant ships, basically they would not stand any chance, Earth, of defending itself against that type of firepower. And so he proposes to Whitcomb and Haverson that he take the rest of the Spartans and head to the Covenant Ford operating base, where they all the ships are gathering for the invasion, kind of like the beachhead for the
Mhm.
invasion, and perform a first strike, hence the name of the novel, and take out the station and all the ships surrounding it. Whitcomb makes it clear to Chief or whatever that getting the message and the data on Halo and stuff to Earth is still his #1 priority, and that this is pretty much going to be a suicide mission for John and the rest of the Spartans. John and the other Spartans completely understand and agree with this, and Whitcomb once again begrudgingly gives permission for John and the others to go ahead. They're dropped out of slipstream space in a fortified dropship to survive the transition, where
Yes.
they successfully managed to infiltrate the unyielding Hierophant, which is the giant Covenant forward operating base. It's basically two enormous, it's almost like two enormous asteroids kind of combined together to make I guess you could say, an artificial moon or an artificial space station. It's think of it like the Death Star, but if it looked like two reverse teardrops, or a giant, as Johnson puts it, a giant kissing octopus.
Or two,
So,
is what it says.
two octopuses kissing, yeah.
Sergeant Johnson was probably one of my favorite parts of the book. But
He's
anyway,
great. Yeah.
yes.
They
That's another. Never mind. We'll get to that in a bit.
But yeah,
Yes.
they infiltrate. They successfully infiltrate the Covenant base or whatever. With a copy of Cortana, who, because of all the data she was carrying, had to stay behind with Whitcomb and the others. But using
Which they copy using the Covenant's AI's ability to
yeah,
replicate itself
yeah,
poorly, but yes.
yeah, that's what Cortana does. So she splits off a copy, so the team and his Spartans can, or Chief and the Spartans can take her with him. They infiltrate the base. I know the book doesn't exactly do a good time or job describing how long they spend on the fucking station, but they spend the better part of a day just trying to get around this giant fucking station.
Yeah.
Eventually, they do. They have the Cortana copy overload the reactor to explode. They barely manage to escape in time, all of them. Well, all except for one. Grace, unfortunately, is killed by the brutes, who make their first appearance here in this book.
Which, following with the observation that you made during Fall of Reach, that every time we encounter
and our new Covenant species, yeah, some Spartan has to die or whatever,
or
always
yeah,
to try to
John
show,
nearly gets his ass kicked by
or
it.
gets his ass kicked. Yeah, James dies for the technically, he doesn't technically, but he dies when you encounter the elites for the first time in Halo: The Fall of Reach.
Yeah.
James and the other Spartans, including Chief, almost die. James gets his arm shot off when they encounter the Hunters for the first time. And now here, when they encounter the Brutes for the first time, Grace basically gets hit like a dozen times with a Brute shot in a ambush and gets blown the fuck up, basically.
Oh yeah. Also, in Fall of Reach, Sam gets like a hole like ripped through his chest by the jackals.
Jackals, yeah. Well, that's the first time they encounter any Covenant like ground forces
Yeah.
ever. But yeah. Anyway, they minus Grace, who they're forced to leave behind after activating her suit's basically like fail-safe self-destruct thing,
Yeah.
which takes out a bunch of Covenant troops. to John's somewhat amusement. They successfully managed to escape the station and are basically kind of like resigned to their fate to try to like lure more Covenant ships in until they get the Ali Ali Oxenfree signal from the far side of a nearby moon, which they go to investigate, where they find the Gettysburg.
The Ascendant Justice, the Covenant ship.
Yeah, I know. They find the Gettysburg by itself, along with Sergeant Johnson on board, and Chief and the others rightly ask, like, what the hell are you doing here? Where the hell is the Ascendant Justice, the Covenant cruiser they had captured? Upon which they realize that Admiral Whitcomb and Haverson were initially just going to, like he said, basically drop him off and leave, but Whitcomb, because of his consciousness, basically stopped briefly on the way back to Earth to kind of check like at the forward operating base what the Spartans and what the UNSC would be going up against, doing some recon basically. And he saw the size of the Covenant Armada, between 500 and 1,000 ships, and realized, much like Chief did, that even if they did go back to Earth and give them the warning, that it wouldn't have actually mattered a damn against that many Covenant ships.
Mm-hmm.
And so Haverson and Whitcomb volunteered to take the Ascendant Justice and what was the fragments of what was left of the Forerunner artifact that they had, and basically crash into the station and the cruiser and lure the rest of the Covenant ships in system towards the base. And
that way, when the station blows
up, it takes out the fleet
because that's the one thing though that's important though. And this is why I keep wanting to mention the minor details, because it's why it makes sense. Like, the Covenant don't kill any of the they specific, because there was a scene earlier when they were being extracted from Reach.
Yeah, like I said, they don't just kill the human. I did mention that earlier. I said they don't just kill the humans; they pursue them because they want to recover the Forerunner artifact. And so because of that, any offensive actions that may damage the crystal, like just like using mass plasma fire or whatever, they don't do. Instead, they want to get in, take the crystal away from them by force, hand to hand, and then kill the humans once the artifact is secured.
Which they say they have it, even though it's destroyed, and so all the Covenant ships are coming to take it back, which lures them in as the station
explodes basically. It explodes, takes out the 500 ships that were there, as well as 100, 200 plus others that were near, around the station, but not actually docked with it. And Chief and the other Spartans, along with Johnson, just kind of watch this silently in just complete shock before having the Gettysburg slipstream space back to Earth, where they report all of this back to the UNSC and also ONI as well.
And one more thing though, because this is another plot point, was that Halsey was making two reports. So the reason why Johnson actually managed to survive the flood is because one, because of an accident, two, because he's in his 70s, due to the fact of having a plasma accident, and being exposed to
that's just a cover basically. So basically, Sergeant Johnson went shortly after he first joined the Marines, and during his time as a Spec Ops soldier, I think shortly after the year 2500, he was inducted into what was then called the Orion program, which was later retroactively called the Spartan 1 program. It was basically the UNSC's first attempt at making super soldiers.
It was the Spartan program, and there was Spartans before the Spartans, essentially.
Spartans before the Spartans, yes. The program was successful, but not nearly to the degree that they were hoping it would be to justify the cost. And so they shut the program down, and all the remaining operators who were part of the first Spartan program basically got shuttled off to other duties, other departments, and things like that. Johnson was actually one of these original Spartan 1s, and in order to preserve the secrecy of the Spartan 1 program, which even people like Catherine Halsey didn't know about, Catherine Halsey was the head of Spartan 2 project, so that shows you how secret it was.
Yeah.
They came up with basically this false report, this false intelligence thing called Boren syndrome, which is this fictional disease that afflicts people who are exposed to large amounts of like radiation from plasma covenant weapons. And all it does is basically kind of like scramble your central nervous system and mess it up, and it usually leads to like long-term degenerative diseases, almost similar to Alzheimer or Parkinson's. But in reality, it was actually the Spartan 1 augmentations that did this. But anyway, so the reason the Flood aren't actually able to infect Johnson is due to the side effects of the Spartan 1 augmentation. Basically, the Covenant virus or whatever, the super virus, couldn't actually infect his nervous system because it was too scrambled. It's almost like how do I put it? It's kind of like if you program a computer to only attack viruses or whatever. Trojan horses are kind of like viruses, but they're able to slip into your computer by kind of like being so unrecognizable they can kind of like slip past the body's defenses. This is kind of like the opposite of that. It was his nervous system was so scrambled the virus wasn't able to adapt to it or whatever.
Yeah, it basically is just like
This guy is way too crazy. I'm not dealing with him.
yeah, no, it's basically like there isn't enough like to actually latch on to.
To actually turn, yeah.
Yeah, like it's not like worth it.
Yeah. And we saw John have a similar thing happen to him where one of the Flood it doesn't happen in the first Halo game, but in Halo the Flood, the novel, one of the Covenant infection forms does manage to actually like latch on and bite him in the back of the neck. But since he's a Spartan 2, John's Spartan augmentation, similar to the Spartan 1's, give him a either a resistance or an immunity to infection, and so he's able to fight the infection form off and not succumb to the infection form. This is one of the plot points that, honestly, I enjoy it, but in the long run, it's not probably brought up as much as it should be, and also doesn't kind of make any sense if you consider the Forerunners. But anyway,
yeah, no, they would all just start like suffering like Alzheimer's and start having seizures. Like,
well, no, not even. It doesn't make any sense to me specifically because I'm like the Forerunners or whatever in Halo Legends and in all we know about them. They basically tried like 1,000 other plans to combat the Flood, where they tried for decades to fight the Flood before eventually having to resort to the Halo plan. And my thought is, well, the Forerunners were fucking millennia, if not eons, ahead of humans by this point, by the year 2500 technologically. So how come the humans are able to come up with basically basically an immunity or a vaccine or whatever to the Flood, but the Forerunners, with all their advanced technology over the course of decades, weren't able to?
I guess they were.
I think that's because the quote-unquote vaccine is the double-edged sword, because it's basically like you're basically giving yourself brain damage in order to be immune to the Flood.
No, not really. You're just getting the Spartan augmentations. The actual Spartan augmentations are what gives you the immunity to the Flood, both the Spartan 1s and Spartan 2s.
But I thought it actually did like still like screw up your brain, because I thought like that's why a lot of the Spartan 1 candidates like died of like cancer and stuff.
No, they died. They either died in combat or they died of other like unrelated things or whatever that was just attributed to this syndrome, like as a cover-up, basically. Okay. In the Spartan 3s or the Spartan 2s or whatever, we know John doesn't go insane or doesn't go crazy or doesn't get Alzheimer's or whatever, and he was immune to the Flood as well. So, like I said, it's one of the things that kind of irks me about it, because it's like, okay, well, getting Spartan augmentations makes you immune to the Flood, and then you get over to Halo 5, and with Spartan 4s or whatever, apparently everybody can now just become a Spartan. So, like, why not just make everybody in your general population a Spartan, and then therefore the Flood can't infect anybody, and then therefore they die off, It's like, well, how come the Forerunners didn't think of that?
I guess.
No, I actually like to think that they did think on giving themselves like lobotomies and like brain damage and stuff, like just so they could like be like survive, and it's like but it didn't really work, because it's like, yeah, your stupid plan is dumb. Like, okay, there's still enough to infect, like, but anyway, the reason why this is important is because Dr. Halsey has like the 2 reports, and one of them includes the information on Sergeant Johnson's quote-unquote disease, and the other one is just like a general like hypothesis. but like if Chief gives like them the general hypothesis, then like the UNSC or the ONI might not be able to come up with a effective cure. But like if like if he gives them the second report, the fucking like one that gives like the details on Johnson's experience, then like they might have a better chance against the Flood, but Johnson might die. Chief like it gives the second report to Haverson because he's like, yeah, this is like Johnson's life is not like important, but like after he sees like Admiral Whitcomb like sacrifice himself like to kill all these like Covenant ships, and it's like if that's what one man can do, like, and I love this because it's like the complete opposite of what like Chief Petty Officer Mendez told him in Fall of Reach, which is sometimes you need to spend lives in order to save lives, like. But like John is like absolutely not. I'm not gonna give him like because like Haverson obviously because he's about to like sacrifice himself, like gives Johnson the fucking like crystal, the data crystal back, and he's like, and it gives it back to Chief, and he's like, after he saw like the heroics of Admiral Whitcomb, he's like, yeah, screw it, I'm just gonna give him the first report, which we know in hindsight that there is no cure to the Flood, even though you mentioned like, yeah, it's like the Spartan like program does give you a resistance, which is fucking retarded. Actually, you come to think of it, we might actually, now that you mentioned, because I thought, and I was like, yeah, no, there's no cure to the Flood. Like the Forerunners tried basically everything. Like we know this from the Forerunner trilogy, but like they don't know this. So this would actually have some like moral consequences. Although we also know that Chief smashes a crystal for nothing anyway, because Johnson does end up dying
Yep.
at the hands of Guilty Spark.
Thanks,
Fucking Guilty
Apple.
Spark. But yeah, so anything else you want to mention that was important?
Hmm. Hmm. No, not really. Other than the fact that it's one of my like it's probably my favorite Halo book. I really enjoy it, even if there are some things that don't make much sense in it.
Yeah, no, there's definitely
Um,
some like nonsensical stuff, but I think this is a good Halo book in terms of, I think this was like, of the books we've read so far for the book club, I think this is probably the best of the three. Like it's definitely better than like
Flood.
yeah, the Flood, like, cuz like the Flood, it feels like a collection of like small stories loosely strung together, and they don't have much relevance, and it's just mostly just a retelling of Combat Evolved through a novelization.
hmm.
Fall of Reach, it does feel like this is like the beginning of something, like it does feel like this is the beginning of I guess for lack of better words, a great journey of some sort, of like this is like the bit like of an epic tale, like, and already in the book First Strike, we already see like how like John is still kind of learning stuff and still kind of like maybe realizing some of the stuff he learned in training was wrong, because now he like believes in like saving everybody's life.
Yep.
Like,
And people say Chief had no character before Halo 4.
yeah, no, they're absolutely fucking wrong. I mean, granted,
If
like their argument for giving Chief a character is like, oh, it's like in the books, and it's like, yeah, he has to have a character, like he has to have a little bit more personality in the books than
if I had to describe, or if I had to compare First Strike to anything, I think the best thing I could possibly compare it to would be Mad Max Fury Road. Both are basically one long, I guess you could say, chase or fight scene or whatever, with interspersed moments of character and drama between the characters, between the like the chase and the fight scenes. But they're both kind of structured very similarly, interestingly enough,
yeah.
because of that. So, but anyway, I have to head out, head over to the game thing. So,
Oh,
I
yeah,
can share at least a couple of my thoughts on the book before I join Courier.
yeah.
that's true.
But it's been nice talking with you, Noble. So
Well,
I'll
thank
talk
you,
to you
and
later.
it's nice having you on the show.
Yeah. Even if none of our schedules ever fucking align with each other, unfortunately.
And
Sadly.
Oh well.
it's gonna get worse with my 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
Oh,
Away.
See you soon.
Anyway,
All right.
yes.
May I go over my thoughts since I don't have much time left?
Yeah, go ahead.
Overall, this was my first Halo book. I very much enjoyed this a lot. Fall of Reach will always be. It's hard for me to pick between Ghost of Onyx, this, and Fall of Reach, but this is a strong book. If you're a Halo fan, give this a read. It fleshes out the characters more. It delivers more about the universe. It's just good. But one of the
Oh yeah, that's another thing that like those are the two metrics of which we measure books in the book club is was it a good piece of literature, which this book was, and did it add something to the lore that was interesting, which this book adds a shit ton to the lore. Like it adds so much. Also, there's one scene that Courier forgot to mention. There's also like a little epilogue of where we meet the Prophet of Truth and Tartarus. But that's not important because I mean, well, they basically recover like some of the shards of crystal, but that's about it. That's all that's important. But other than that, like yeah, but yeah, so this book was like I think it's like a better piece of literature than Fall of Reach. Obviously, it's a better piece of literature than The Flood. It adds a lot more of like it adds more to the lore than both Fall of Reach and Flood combined. Like, cause there's a lot of stuff that we learn about Covenant. We learn a lot about like their technology, which also Cortana is able to like reverse engineer like the calculations for how they fire the plasma turrets, and she's able to also make that more effective. That's something that we forgot to mention.
Yep.
It does flesh out the Covenant a lot. It does give us a lot of like background and insight to a lot of the things of the war. It's just a good book that like has a lot of like interesting lore and a lot of yeah, it's one of the so far it's been one of the better ones.
Indeed, and I'll go over some of my thoughts rapid fire.
All right.
One, I liked how they characterized Fred, Kelly, and the other Spartans. It showed that they weren't just mindless killing machines, showed that they had true bonds, hence why the flashback chapter was my favorite. Second of all, Todd McLaren's narration, well, since this is, to my knowledge, his last Halo book, this was his best narration yet. All the characters have appropriate voices, and you could hear the enthusiasm. Even if
just except one problem was Terrence Hood was had a English or a Scottish accent for some reason.
Like if he was impersonating Sean Connery like this.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. It was like, is he trying to do a Sean Connery impression? Like, I could totally see that, like, being like I could see that being like the voice for Hood, but like we know that that's not what Hood sounds like in the game.
Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing aboard that weird ship? Also, what else? Oh yes, some of the most powerful, one of the funniest but amusing scenes, two amusing ones, real quick, is when Elias Haverson he's examining one of the engineers that fixed Chief's armor after his duel with Del Vadam. Even though we don't know it's him until further on in the series. And Elias is like, "Man, you saved Chief. You're a good little creature." Whips out his pistol and blows the creature's brains out. And Cortana goes, "Why did you do that?" Look, Cortana. This engineer just touched Mjolnir. If we fail and he gets recaptured by the Covenant, they'll know everything about our armor. Good point. And speaking of Cortana, I don't know how I feel about the whole Chief Cortana love story or thing they're putting in. But one moment I did find really cute, well, two moments, was like when just before Chief and the other Spartans leave for unyielding Hierophant, Cortana's telling her about the copy, Chief about the copy. He says, "Remember, she's only half the woman I am."
Oh yeah, that was some like that was just some like funny like dude. Cortana was like way more bitchy than normal in this book. Like she's just like very what's the word?
Exactly.
Like I mean, granted for good reason. Like she's probably like yeah, because she like it's stated in the book multiple times that she's like reaching her like limit in terms of like processing, and she even makes some really stupid mistakes.
Yeah, but
because like she can't like she's running so many systems at once, and especially since the
Halo data is so fucking sized.
So, yeah, I imagine partially it's because the Forerunners don't know how to compress shit.
Yeah, just like 343 and in Treyarch.
fucking trick. Yeah, just modern game developers in general don't understand what file compression is. Like,
And I just got 2 other scenes. So let me say the full line because I think it's cute.
uh,
She's only half the one I am, as long as she copied the good parts. I'm all good. Another one was at the end when Chief goes, "We would have died without you." And Cortana turned pink for a moment, then turned back to blue and said, "Was that a compliment?" And Chief said nothing. That was a cute moment. And
yeah, that's cute. But dude, I just see that as them being like friends. I don't see that as romantic. But the
So-
other, speaking of Cortana, that's another thing we forgot to mention. Like during the unyielding Hierophant
raid.
like battle or infiltration, like Cortana, like she makes a copy of herself. Like the copy of herself makes a copy of herself.
So what we saw in Halo 4.
Basically what we saw in Halo 4 happens, except like, okay, they're like, by the way, Chief, making a copy of a copy can have some unforeseen consequences. Yes, and then like she's like, just do it so you could stay in the system. And then like later on, like Cortana just like keeps making copies, like, and then it's like, oh, by the way, to the point where like Cortana tells Chief twice. It's like, we made a copy specifically to talk with you. I also think it was funny when Chief tries to contact Cortana, like there's not a response, and there's like a million Cortana voices like chatting. It's like, what should we do? Crap, Chief. Like, it's just like, I can't imagine like how much like strain that must put on the Covenant's like computer technology of like. It's basically like a virus at this point, like of like Cortana's just like self-replicating and like spamming the Covenant's like system with like infiltration software. Like,
scenario in my head where Chelsea like, "God damn it, you can't fix my computer! What the hell am I supposed to do? I don't understand any of this!"
No, oh my god, no! It's literally they're just getting spam Cortana porn or whatever. Like that's why they have so many copies.
All right, 2 more notes before I head off. One, Whitcomb. What a badass character he was.
Oh, he's an absolute Chad.
Indeed. I even remember this speech. "Come on, mighty Covenant warriors. We're in the middle of your fleet with your holy of holies. Remember what I told you about the Alamo? Sure, it was a tactical defeat, but it was a strategic victory. It made the enemy afraid." And the fact that
that's another thing.
And impact Chief that way just shows like, man, we needed more guys like like Whitcomb. Otherwise, yeah, Covenant would have lost the war years earlier. And say what you will about Whitcomb, and then I got one final note before I have to head off. The guys are waiting for me.
Yes.
All right, my final note is Halsey. I really love that they did characterizing her, and it just shoots the whole, ooh, Halsey's evil. She had no remorse thing right through the head. As in, my favorite scene, not my favorite, but one of my favorite scenes in all of Halo is where she's giving Chief the Chris, like, look, this one might help the Flood. This one's better. Why should I not pick the better one? They're going to kill Johnson.
Yeah, that's the thing though. Like Chief, like that's the thing that we were talking about earlier, is that Chief like has to learn the lesson of like saving one man's life is sometimes necessary, and like he should be trying to say, like that's something that Halsey said, is that she should have been fighting to save everybody.
And one line that shoots the whole, oh, I didn't care about trying to teach her, I'm evil, like Karen Travis and 343 tried to say, was, I'm tired of sacrificing people for the greater good, Cortana. That was just such a powerful scene, and I really like how they did it. Well, specifically Eric Nyland did it.
Oh, yes.
Notes? I'm sorry.
We basically covered everything that was like relevant. I'm sure there's like some small thing that was like kind of interesting to talk about, but like didn't affect the plot, because there's a lot going on in this book. The book feels very cinematic, if you know what I mean.
You could have made a whole game out of this. Let's be honest.
And no, I feel like I feel like maybe not a game, because I feel like a game would be too like you'd be jumping, like I guess if it was like the Call of Duty games, maybe, where it's like jumping from perspective to perspective, but like not like a regular like Halo game, like, you know what I mean? What I was thinking though is like it just feels very cinematic, where it feels like none of the time is being wasted, and every single like scene is like building up to something like important, and like every scene is basically relevant in some way, and every piece of information is like, there's not a single like word on the like. There's not a single page on this book or chapter that is wasted on useless nonsense or like sidetracking, and everything is relevant.
And my last note is just, I really liked William 043's character. And we could kind of get it. He's a bit of a gun nut when he's explaining, well, we found anaconda missiles, rockets, and you're going to love this, 2 tactical nukes. And Fred could even hear the excitement in his voice, and even Fred went, 2 tactical nukes. So overall, I really loved this book and what it did for Halo. See you, Noble. It's been an honor talking with you. Have a nice night, everyone.
All right. And with that, that is the end of this experience. Thank you, everyone, for watching and for tuning along with the following along with the Reclaimer Book Club. If you want to, if you want to join the book club, there is a link to my Discord, and you could just message me on Discord to join the Reclaimer Book Club, where you can maybe participate in the next stream. And so next month, so for March, I guess this month technically, since we are a little bit late. Yeah, so next month or this month, we're going to be reading Halo Ghosts of Onyx, which is the next book in the series, which is a sequel to this book. And we'll read that, and it'll explain a lot about the Spartan 3 program. We're going to learn about that a little bit, which should be fun. But anyway, that's all. Hopefully you guys want to, but even if you don't want to join the book club, you just want to hang out on the Discord, we got the link in the description below. And that's all we got. Nobody else is here. Anyway, yeah. See you guys next time.